All right, good morning. It's great to be here. I always enjoy getting to visit Beckley. I lived in Parkersburg, grew up in Parkersburg, born there, and until I moved to Charleston recently with my new role, I was flying through Beckley every time I flew out of Parkersburg. That was our pit stop on the way to Charlotte. So I always get to see the beautiful city of Beckley from the sky. So I want to talk to you today about a number of things. Commerce being the big one, of course. West Virginia, what's happening from a commerce perspective. If we have time, and I'll take the lead from the team here, I'll be happy to answer questions as well. Love to share some more specific information about what's going on in the Department of Commerce. You know, I think probably what we have here, even in this room, we have a variety of skill sets. And business operates on a variety of skill sets. That's what it's about. That's what makes something successful, is when each person brings their particular strengths to a project. And I think West Virginia is a great example of that. That's what really makes economic development succeed. So we've had a lot of changes in the Department of Commerce over the past year and a half. I came in January of 2025, and at that point, commerce it still is quite varied. It's one of those departments that spans a lot of government. We have workforce, we have Department of Rehabilitation, we have all communications for the state, we have just forestry, DNR. In fact, someone told me when I took on the secretarial role, they said, Matt, you know that commerce is like the island of misfit toys. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And they said, if they don't know where it goes, they give it to commerce. And so that's what I came into. But frankly, my business background, I really loved it. We've got a great team. But then in July 2025, the legislature decided to put economic development, the Department of Economic Development, back under the purview of commerce. And so at that point, we basically doubled in size. We went from about 8 to 15 different divisions, and we've been building that team since. I brought in Christine Davies, who is my new Deputy Secretary of Economic Development and Workforce Innovation, and she has been awesome. You guys have heard a lot recently, I think, about some things that are happening in this state. You've heard a lot about probably 50 by 50. Governor Morrissey's plan to basically become even more energy dominant as the years move forward here in West Virginia. We want to truly become, and we have the capability to become, what we'll refer to as the battery of the nation. We can power this country. And I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. You've seen things, you've heard a lot about data centers. I want to talk about that today. But you know, it was a year ago, I was speaking to a lot of groups around the state, and I know now this year that I didn't know what I didn't know. There's a lot going on in this state, and there's a lot of folks moving in the right direction. I love what's happening here in Beckley and the Raleigh County area. Last year, I spoke about optimism. I talked about how West Virginia, with our great legislative leadership, has been building what I call a base of readiness, and I feel like we're at that inflection point now where suddenly things are starting to really happen. You've heard, I'm sure, about some of the recent announcements about Amazon, 2 new centers. You've heard about the data centers with Google, also up in Berkeley County. Guys, that's just the beginning. West Virginia is truly on the edge of even greater things, and I'd love to talk to you more about that today. So I want to talk, though, today more broadly to begin with, to give perspective, and I don't know if, hopefully you'll like this or it'll be relevant. I want to talk about more the forest than the trees at the moment. And so go back in time, and I've got to see if my slides here can work. All right, let's see here. I don't know if that's the right slide. Here we go. I'm going to go back one. I might be going backwards. Let's see here. I can't see. Is that the bridge? No? Okay. We're going to start there, and we'll just keep moving, and hopefully I'll hit the right ones here. But I do want to talk about Volcano, West Virginia. So when I was a child, one of the things I was born in Parkersburg, lived West Virginia my whole life. My mother the same.
The slides are right there. You can see them.
Oh, thank you. The good cue. They're right in front of me, so this will work. Thank you, sir. But when I was a child, one of the things my mother liked to do, she grew up in a little town called Walker, West Virginia, and she would take my brother and I for hikes back where she grew up. And we would take these long walks through the hills of West Virginia and Wood County. And one of the places she always liked to take us to was this little town called Volcano, which used to exist back in the late 19th century, right there in Wood County. And all that really remains there are some ruins, but there's one particular site that was called the Stiles Mansion. And I love the way my mother would talk about that, because her mother would talk about the Stiles Mansion. And it was just sitting outside of what was once this little town of Volcano. Previously, it was called White Oak, West Virginia. So it's about 15 miles east of Parkersburg. And this mansion had been abandoned for decades, and the roof had collapsed. Nature, you could tell, was really reclaiming this old mansion. But I think even as a child, I could sense that this place had meant something very important in the past. And I think that ruin of that house was really a lesson, one of my first lessons in economic development. I want to talk about that today and how that's relevant, I think, to what we're facing. So more about history. 1865, Civil War had ended. My family, my background was my history. People were growing into the region. Some had lived further south and had chosen the Union side and moved back home to West Virginia. I still have my great-great-grandfather's Springfield rifle from the Union Army. My mother gave it to me. She said, "You're the oldest kid. You get it. You're going to pass it on down." She's really into genealogy. If you haven't kind of figured that out, she knows. She tells me all these people I'm related to. But that year in Volcano, a very deep well was brought in, and that's when the stampede began in Volcano. Volcano got its name because that earliest oil well, and some of those wells they were drilling didn't just produce oil, they basically erupted. Like you see in the videos. Oil just gushed out of the ground, and it would shoot out with such force that people said it looked like a miniature volcano, and that's where the name. So overnight, practically, Volcano became one of the earliest kind of energy boom towns in the nation. So late 1800s, the area was anything but quiet right then. Volcano sat at the center of one of these earliest oil booms, and it had wells, it had refineries, it had rail lines, had housing, and people were drawn there. Why? Because there's opportunity, there's work. And so the Volcanic Oil and Gas Company, which was led by William Stiles Jr., who largely controlled the biggest part of that field, he started to work on his business. And he created a very unique pumping system where one continuous cable was kind of daisy-chained throughout several miles, throughout the hollers, over the hills, back to one pump house. And that system everybody talked about it. There was an 18-foot laminated white oak wheel that ran that. And so you think about the technology of the day and how fascinating that would have been to witness or see this. So these entrepreneurs like William Stiles Jr. helped pioneer this oil production in the area. And then families like the Stiles invested. They innovated. They built the infrastructure out with what they had under the ground. And at its height, Volcano supported thousands of people in that little town that's now woods. There were hotels, there were schools, there were churches, there were newspapers, there were businesses that grew up all around this new industry that was driving all this commerce. And it was a place of ambition. It was a place of optimism, and it was a place also of risk, which, as we all know, I can tell you from my business background, risk and reward do go together. It's a part of business. You can't be the type of person who has to have everything perfect before you act, or you'll be left behind. Sometimes we learn as we go, and we fix things. That's what we can do. But this workforce also that came to Volcano was diverse. It was mobile. There were people from surrounding states that said they want to be there. They came from overseas. There were the Scots, the Irish, others that were drawn by opportunity. Most of my mother tells me genealogy is Scottish. That's where most of the coal miners in my family all came from. But many would later move on to coal, to timber, or manufacturing. But these people were willing to uproot their lives. They were willing to learn these new skills, and they were willing to take risks in pursuit of a better future. And in many ways, they were, I guess, what we could call the original mobile workforce. So the Stiles Mansion, let's talk a little more about that. I'm going to get to today in a minute. But it expanded, and in 1866, it constructed what was called the Laurel Fork and Sand Hill Railroad. Now, this was the first railroad built in West Virginia, and it connected to the B&O. The population had soared to 3,500 people. Stores, hotels, I talked about, an opera house, saloons, newspapers, churches, 2 schools, and a post office even. Natural gas was plentiful. And Volcano, interestingly enough, was the first community in the U.S. that was lit by natural gas, that was piped throughout town to light the streets. The Stiles Mansion had running water, and it was well known that it was also the first real bathtub that had ever been seen in Wood County. But just as quickly as it expanded, it faded. That's the rest of the story. In August 1879, disaster struck Volcano. A fire, which we believe was started maybe in the business district, spread rapidly throughout that town. It was fueled by wooden structures, of course, buildings that had oil tanks, nearby storage for oil. It destroyed a great deal of the town. And while there was little documented loss of life, the economic damage was truly catastrophic. And Volcano never really recovered from that. So what happened? People moved on. Investments dried up, and what remained are stories and ruins of this period of time, short period in time. And so now, this little town sits hidden in Mount Wood Park in Wood County. And I can tell you, as a frequent trail runner of that area, I'm always running, and I'll see some strange piece of metal or pipe coming out of the ground. And I always wonder, what that went to back 150 years ago. But it didn't survive. Volcano did not survive because West Virginians lacked the skills they needed or the ambition, but it was because the infrastructure, the markets, the systems around them changed dramatically very quickly, and they couldn't recover. And they weren't ready. So I think the story is really relevant to us today, and that's what made me think about this style mansion. And bring me back to my childhood for a minute. So when I stood there, I think as a kid, it wasn't just I was looking at this decaying building. I was looking at the residue of a boom that had reshaped the community and then passed it by. So it's not a criticism, again, of the people who built Volcano. It's a reminder, though, I think, that economic development is a powerful force. It's a disruptive force and unforgiving if we don't plan for it, if we don't plan for durability when these things are confronting us. So let's shift to today, what I really want to talk about with you. We're living through another, I think, major reordering of commerce, of business. One that is probably faster, it's even broader, and it's more complex than anything those early oil men could have thought about or could have even imagined. Technology, energy, our labor, our capital are all being rewired, almost like it's all happening at once, right? I had a gentleman I was working with who's got a very, very big project coming to West Virginia, and he tried to explain it to me what he's dealing with, and he said, have you ever thrown a football through a tire swing? I was like, well, yeah, actually I did that as a kid. He goes, okay, I want you to imagine 6 tire swings in a row, and they're all swinging at the same time. And I'm trying to throw my football through that. And so artificial intelligence, AI, has emerged now, right? It's just overnight, it feels like. It was just a year and a half ago we really started hearing all this. But it's become almost immediately one of the most powerful economic forces of our lifetime. This is the next computer age, only exponential, what it's going to do to all of us, to the economic the workforce, commerce, everything. Education. It's full of promise, right? But it's also one of these things that can be very deeply polarizing. And I truly believe we can't just turn our backs to it and hope that it doesn't have an impact on us. So here's the reality, and we can't ignore this. Many people are very anxious about this, understandably. They're skeptical today. I served as party chairman for a couple years, and I can tell you I was in that more of that political end of the world. People are skeptical of government. They're skeptical of institutions, and I don't blame them. When I was running my businesses, I used to always say, my biggest competitor is the government. Daggone it. And so that's understandable. But they worry, though, sometimes that systems are rigged against them. Younger workers I'm really concerned about because, in particular, they fear that they're going to be replaced entirely by technology before they ever get a foothold, before they buy a home, which is getting more and more difficult. West Virginia is still one of the few places where homes are affordable, and a lot of us might say, are you kidding? Here? That's already happened here, too. But if we, I think, as leaders don't acknowledge that anxiety, we're going to lose credibility before we even begin and try to message about what's in front of us and the opportunity. That's why I think that history matters. So West Virginia's been here before. We've been at the edge of a national transformation, and I think Volcano does remind us that these things are real. These transformational events happen, but they bring opportunity. Along with fear, disruption, change, it's going to attract outsiders, it's going to shift labor markets, and it's going to challenge all of our institutions. But if we fail to translate that transformation into something lasting, durable, that's locally beneficial, this legacy can be just as fragile as Volcano. So we're at this other pivotal moment. The new oil today is data. Say that again. The new oil is data. And just as oil powered Volcano, data centers, AI infrastructure are at the heart, the center of the modern economy. And that's not going to change. I spoke with a gentleman recently who is an apologist basically for the fossil fuel industry, and Alex Epstein is his name. He's been on a lot of the big podcasts, the Joe Rogans and others. And I was talking to him about West Virginia. And I said, so even if what happens if we get really efficient with these things in terms of energy? We don't need as much. He goes, let me tell you, he said, the energy needs are so exponential over the next decade that there is no way, no matter what is built, we're going to keep up. The East Coast will be experiencing brownouts in the next decade. It's going to happen. The energy needs are that great. And West Virginia happens to be positioned in a very sweet spot because of what we have under the ground. One of the stats that I love to share, I steal this from the Shale Crescent guys, is that coal is who we are, it's our identity, but energy is truly our bigger identity, and coal is the big part of that. But one of the others is natural gas, as we all know. If you put a pin into Wheeling, West Virginia, and draw a 90-mile radius around it, 25% of the natural gas reserves in the entire United States sit in that little pocket. People are going to come to West Virginia whether we're proactive or reactive to get energy. So with this AI infrastructure sitting at the heart of the modern economy, we know it's going to require this energy input, it's going to require infrastructure, it's going to require a skilled workforce. And that brings primary and tertiary impacts, right? Construction jobs, engineering jobs, supplier networks, tax-based growth, long-term demand for technical talent. All those things are going to happen. Data centers, advanced manufacturing, cloud computing, AI infrastructure are now foundational, I think, to national security, to economic competitiveness in almost everyday life. I guarantee you all were using data centers multiple times today. When you watched something streaming on your phone or TV, when you made a call, when you made a text, when you on your laptop. So what has been done to prep for this? Last year, Governor Morrissey led his agenda with House Bill 2014, the microgrid bill. And our legislature and the governor passed this because they were proactive enough and insightful enough to be at front of this, unlike any other state in the nation, to say, you know what, we're going to allow you to come into this state and help and build out your own energy infrastructure to get there as fast as you can. We want to help you do that in a responsible, environmentally friendly way. We passed license reciprocity, which will allow for people with a license in another state that have been vetted to come and pass that work in West Virginia. I also have the Division of Labor, and I've been amazed at the increase in contractors, HVAC technicians, plumbers coming into West Virginia because of this. One-stop permitting, and apologize for the spelling. I see somebody didn't get that one right. I loved spelling as a kid. That was always irritates me, so I'm going to keep staring at it. Speed to build is really what Governor Morrissey likes to talk about. He wants things to happen fast. He knows that mantra I talked about as far as business, you have to operate quickly. We have to be ready, and we have to be able to respond. And then our workforce. So this is where I think West Virginia has a true once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Through House Bill 2014 and behind-the-meter energy production, a lot of it's going to be natural gas, but microgrids, electrical infrastructure that uses our coal, uses our gas. I'm all about, if renewables can contribute, great. We want all those electrons we can get, however we can get them. But we're going to be able to do some things that few states can do. We can offer certainty. We offer certain power. I was watching I think it was the governor of Massachusetts talk about something today, and she's talking about all these great windmills they have off the coast. And I'm like, well, what happens when the wind's not blowing? Not reliable. I love the fact that it's producing energy, but reliable energy is also very necessary. But we can do this responsibly. I want to make it clear, our job is not simply, though, to attract data centers. Our job is to make sure that this new boom does not leave West Virginia behind and does not leave West Virginia in ruins where what we have is just taken from our state. We want it to stay in our state. Energy never goes away. It just changes form. And we want that to sit and spin in West Virginia. So Governor Morrissey's agenda is basically just that, building the base, targeted investment, and Deputy Secretary Davies, who now I mentioned earlier, is talking about also what we'll call Work First program, where we're taking folks, where we have a real challenge in this state with labor force participation, focusing more not on how do we get you benefits, but how do we first get you back to work. That's When you come to see someone at the state level, we want to help you with the needs that you have, but we also want to help you get a job if you're capable and able. Work first. And I think I love that statement because it carries a lot of meaning and purpose. But the workforce starts in every community. Apprenticeships, training partnerships with businesses, colleges, technical schools, clear pathways for education and for employment. That all really gets done at the grassroots level, at the ground level. And so if data is the new oil, then skills, building skill sets in West Virginians are the new drilling technology. And so it also means we've got to be honest with our communities. In an era where people no longer share the same set of facts, stories matter more than slogans. Because, boy, I've been amazed at the misinformation I've seen coming out on data centers, for example. Oh, my gosh. I'm just like, does someone really believe that? I guess some do. I think where people are is they're waiting to hear the facts. They want to understand, most people. They want, well, tell me what is the truth around these things? Are they really that bad, or what are their positives? I think people want to know the truth. They see what's being built, and they want to know why it matters, and they want to know how it benefits them and their communities directly. So let's also be clear about the reality that we face. We have the resources, but West Virginia does not currently have an abundance of what I'll call large, fully site-ready industrial land. And one of the things I've really been excited about that Governor Morrissey and the legislature have been working on is that they've all voiced readiness and focus to deal with that challenge. In our commerce, we are responsible for that site development, those site development goals, and we are actively building that out even further. But that's where all of you can make a difference here, bringing those sites to us so we can also share those sites for whatever type of business. I like talking about the team analogy, where we're going: technology, energy, and advanced manufacturing. Those three things are what's going to change this state, continue to change this state. So it's a team effort, and I'm going to ask each of you to help step up and help with that. So real quickly, I want to talk about workforce. Our adult workforce is strong, and the problem is it's fully utilized. Future growth is we're going to have to attract talent alongside with workforce development in the state. It's going to take both efforts. And also, let's not forget that for federal dollars that once filled a lot of gaps in West Virginia and our infrastructure are no longer guaranteed. I can tell you that. Working from Commerce, from stepping in and finding out, those monies are not coming here this year. We're going to have to find a way to make this work. We're going to have to work with the products we have. And we understand that large, flat, developable tracts of land that are ready for investment, there's a limited availability of that. But West Virginians, we adapt. And so I think it also means we've got to shift a little bit about how we think about economic development and how we invest in site readiness and in site development. But we've got to deliberately now put together, align, I guess is the best word, land use, power strategy, workforce planning, and community readiness around these projects. Just like all those swinging tires, we've got to put all those together and find those projects that truly fit our state so we can transform the economy. All right, getting close here to finishing up, and if we have time, you guys let me know. I'll be happy to take questions. But I want to say that data centers are not a silver bullet, but I want to also let you know that they are an opportunity. They're another vehicle for progress and for prosperity. They really are. My goal in commerce is not to operate, though, project by project, but I want to create a broader system that supports anyone who wants a long-term, capital-intensive investment in this state. That's my goal. I want to attract those kind of companies that know if they come here, they can be assured long-term they're going to be profitable in this state. Things are not going to go change back and forth willy-nilly. And that's not going to happen unless we use all of our skill sets. So bringing it all back together, booms without systems don't last. So my suddenly message I talked about from last year still holds, but just with some qualifications. You know, the lesson of Volcano is not that booms are bad. These things that we're experiencing are not horrible, but they don't last unless a durable system is ready to manage them. And so we're going to build something more resilient here in West Virginia. We're going to move from just extraction to extraction and infrastructure, keeping that energy spinning here. And we're going to move from these one-time wins to sustainability within the state. So leadership at this time, I think it requires just a few things. Requires clarity of purpose, putting everybody on the same page. It requires probably a little humility, but it also requires follow-through. And so Volcano teaches us that economic transformation is navigable. It is something we can get through, but only when leaders connect innovation to people. So when they invest not just in infrastructure, but they also invest in human capital, that's going to be, I think, the future for West Virginia. So we've got a chance now, I think, to write a different ending than Volcano experienced. And so instead of these abandoned mansions, we are going to build lasting institutions. We're not going to chase fleeting booms, but we're going to create durable systems. And instead of communities watching these opportunities just pass them by, we're going to anchor the prosperity here at home. That's my goal as Commerce Secretary. And I think if we do this well, we're going to see decades from now children hiking these hills in West Virginia, and they're not going to find ruins, they're just going to find more development. I know a lot of us, probably why we do what we do is for the next generation, right? It's for our kids. It's for I've had 7 grandkids in the last 5 years. I went from 0 to 7. Whew! That's starting to catch up with me, I'll have to tell you. I just got to spend my first vacation in 9 months was last week, and my youngest son, who doesn't have children, and his girlfriend were there with us, and I was just like, oh wow, vacation can be relaxing when there's not 7 5-year-olds running around everywhere. I love them, but still, we do this because we want that next generation to prosper and be better off than we are. And so I think that's the lesson from Volcano. It's the warning from Volcano. And you know, the whole point is that this is what is in front of us. We've got to respond to this today, and that's the task before us. So thank you guys very much for having me here. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Love to answer questions if we have some. And someone break the ice, and then it will get rolling maybe.
We've got one over here.
Oh, now I can see you. I was standing right in that spotlight.
Hello, I'm Molly Williams. I'm the Executive Director of Raleigh County Parks and Recreation. I've also had the privilege of serving as the West Virginia Recreation and Parks Association President, as well as on the steering committee for the Outdoor Summit that was recently in Charleston. Yeah. You alluded to outdoor recreation several times within your talk. You never mentioned that as part of economic development. So my question is, do you feel that it's part of outdoor development? Do you feel outdoor recreation is part of economic development? And do you think that the state of West Virginia needs an Office of Outdoor Recreation? And do you feel that it fits under commerce?
It's a great question. I don't want to give myself even more work and I certainly don't want to take anything away from great work that Chelsea, Secretary Ruby, is doing in tourism. So just to give you a little bit of background of the way this works, I have DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and we have the state parks. Secretary Ruby in tourism, though, works very closely in terms of that outdoor economy. In fact, she probably is more responsible for that than I am. And under her leadership, I don't know if you've seen the numbers, you probably have over the past 3 years, what West Virginia has seen, which has been a huge change in investment, or not just our investment, but our return on investment. And I love the fact that you bring this up, because I want everybody to know what Molly, right? What Molly said is very important for us as a part of our economic growth. $1 investment in outdoor economics produces $13. Now, any business would love that. And that's why it's so important for us to continue to do that. As far as a new office, I'll tell you one thing, I'm afraid to pitch to the governor, hey, I want more government, governor. He kicked me out of the office. But I do feel that doesn't change the fact that it's extremely important. And I feel very confident with commerce and tourism working together, we've seen great results. And I will actually tell you, there's probably, because there are multiple departments working in that particular area, that's better than a lot of other parts of our state. But absolutely, I mean, we are bringing people here. I think is the Ascend program got a booth here? But we are actively bringing people in who want to live and enjoy the outdoors here in West Virginia and work here, maybe remotely. But it's incredibly important, if that's the best way I can answer that. I totally agree with you. I don't know necessarily if we need a new office, but I would tell you that I'm very pleased with the direction. I loved the meeting this year. That was the kickoff, I think, for the first time they've ever done that. And I love the fact that it was focused on the fact that economic growth and the outdoors and the environment can go hand in hand. Totally believe that. Thank you for the work you're doing on that too. Appreciate it. Any other questions? Yes, sir. I see a gentleman back here. Okay. He's going to get your mic on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Joseph Golden, and I understand that certain industries came to West Virginia through the efforts of the West Virginia Economic Development Authority. I wonder if you could explain that process a little more in detail and what that organization has relationship with your department.
Excellent question. So glad you asked this, because I'll be frank, there's a lot of people even working in government who don't understand the distinction, and I can understand that coming from the outside. There's what we call the Economic Development Authority, which is a separate group and institution, we'll call it, that operates outside of the Department of Commerce and the Division of Economic Development. Though they are separate entities, they work very closely together. Basically, you can think about the Economic Development Authority as a bank that helps facilitate and fund investments in this state, whether that be through forgivable loans, through low interest loans, through other arrangements, partnering with banks, for example, to help fund projects. But it also then has a board that does still work closely with. In fact, the chairman of the board is the deputy secretary for Governor Morrissey. So we are very tied together. I actually talk with the leadership of the ADA regularly, as does a lot of the leadership in economic development. But economic development is a different animal, so to speak, than the Economic Development Authority. The Economic Development Division is actually more of the folks that go out and work with the prospective businesses. We also have funds that we can incent with as appropriate, but think about the Economic Development Authority as a group that was created to kind of sit outside, a little more outside of direct government influence. Even though we all know in the real world all these things interact. But it's a great question, because a lot of people don't know that these are two different entities. Yes, you have a follow-up?
Yes. You said that the Economic Development Authority is like a bank. who are the depositors? How do they get their money to then work with different industries to give loans?
So another great question. So originally, there's been different ways the Economic Development Authority has been funded over the years, right? The legislature at one point funded that entity to get it kicked off and operating. We work with local banks to help facilitate are basically backing up with some of those funds, maybe a loan from another bank. We act as the surety for that to help them get loans with another, a Truist or a Huntington or somebody like that. And so originally, though, those funds have to come from somewhere, right? And so it's before my time, and I could probably get you some more facts, specifics on where all those funding originally came from. But that was funded through state entities originally to get that up and running. You probably heard also there was some discussion this year as we looked at, the legislature was looking at something similar to what Jobs Ohio is doing. Jobs Ohio basically has regular income from liquor sales. Is where they take the taxes from that, and those are deposited into that organization, which basically then goes out and does a lot of the work that the Division of Economic Development is doing and Economic Development Authority. And there's pros and cons to that, but and I think it's worth looking at. I've talked to the folks at the Jobs Ohio very frequently to learn more about the pros and cons, but all of them come with some costs too, the more you separate it entirely. But it is an interesting dynamic. I'd love to talk to you more. I can get you more specifics, though, on how that evolved and originally with that funding. But thank you for bringing that up, because that's something a lot of people don't understand, the distinction, that there is a distinction. Appreciate it. Yes?
One more question.
My question is this. We've seen a lot of development in the northern part of the state, north of Charleston. Like Mason County, for example, is absolutely booming.
Yes.
What are you doing, or can the Department of Commerce do to help these southern counties get investments and development?
Boy, a lot. We can do a lot. And in fact, I sure wish I wasn't under an NDA for some things. But I can tell you this, we are actively looking at southern West Virginia, and I can tell you that companies that are coming in here, there is as much interest in this part of the state, in the southern region of the state, as there is in other parts of the state. And I am very confident that you are going to be very excited about some of the investments coming to the southern counties. Yes, it's a need, right? We know that some of our biggest challenges are in our southernmost part of the state. But the things that could be happening, let's just, for example, let's say a data center or data centers want to be here. Transformational for some of these counties. Think about having the funds to build a brand new school every other year. Think about having the funds to fix every water infrastructure issue over in 12 months. But yes, I will promise you, we are just as interested, if not more so, in broadening out that investment to southern West Virginia and encouraging anyone who comes to the state looking at investment to consider every county and what each county brings. Thank you for that question. Thank you all again very much. Pleasure being here.
Thank you so much, Secretary Herridge.